It's taking a while to just get connecting to YouTube. Okay, good. Okay, call to order this special meeting of the Easton Reading Region 9 Joint Policy Committee at 9:14 a.m. on December 18th, 2020. Members in attendance, Maureen Williams, Gwen Denny, John Stinson, and Dr. Pearson Ugal. Our first order of business is the approval of the minutes for the December 11th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Gwen. Thank you, Maureen. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye, unanimously passed. Very good. It takes us to item 3, public comment. Seeing no members of the public present, we will move on to committee member comment on number 4.
Gwen, did you really legit want to raise the issue of the snow?
No, that was
okay.
Okay. After the third email, I did you have a job? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I did get a more than a few emails in my ER9 about the absence of the snow day.
I saw a lengthy discussion on Facebook. I mean, I don't know, my view, I was on a calendar committee years ago. It was the year that that Veterans Day was eliminated. And that got some heat, but I agreed with the philosophy of getting rid of it. And I just feel like there's, it's death, taxes, the school calendar. It's not the hill I'm going to die on. Sometimes you're going to like it. Sometimes you're not going to like it. Yeah,
right.
Sometimes you get the early dismissal before a holiday and sometimes you don't. Right. Just live with it.
Yeah.
It's okay.
What it is it's a lot of stress from other things finding its way out over an issue that otherwise wouldn't be as big as it seemed to me to be becoming.
I was astonished at and frankly, we're about to have 10 days off.
Right.
Anybody else a little nervous about how we're going to fill those 10 days up with no place to go? It's a long time.
Yeah, I'm taking off next week. The days ahead of them being out of school, just so I can prepare. I want to first. I'm just going to have some me and Netflix time.
You're going to work on that luge in the yard,
and then I'm going to work on the luge in the yard. That's why I'm hoping it stays cold, so that I can prepare some activities that will keep us all busy and active during the break. All right. Any additional board member comment? Okay. All right. That will take us to discussion and possible action. We'll pick up on the 3000 series. Sharing my screen here. The task at hand, besides zooming in, there we go. The task at hand, so in our sort of previous discussions, we made significant progress through this, through this series. I believe we actually got to the last page in our last discussion, and I think along the way, especially as we approached the last, say, 10% of this, we came across a number of issues that require sort of coordination. That we believe requires coordination with Transportation Committee, coordination with Food Services Committee, and a number of issues where we've identified a desire to connect the dots between what our obligations are as a matter of policy and our obligations, sort of in the places where we've created contracts and sort of outsourced some of this work, and sort of maintaining our oversight and sort of connecting the sort of the language, which tends to be primarily in the form of your employees who are doing your food services, your employees who are transporting your students, as opposed to, what it means to, have oversight of the companies that might be doing that on your behalf. So I think that the major task, and I see here, page 142, we have, I think, a comment from Maureen stopping on December 3rd. I don't know, Maureen, I know we've gone through in person via these sessions since that, and sort of reviewed some of these. Is there any? Do you know if you've made any additional comments on your?
No, I have not. I have not opened this since last week. So. Okay,
good. So I think we have. Did I just see it? LOL. That's excellent. Well, we can look at that comment as we resolve comment.
Yeah, I mean, it's so bizarre that they cited that we were chatting about that last week. Is it just? Right. I mean, it's almost nonsensical. It's almost like whoever was drafting this felt the need to cite something, so they pulled those rules. Weird.
Is it a fair interpretation to say it's like, saying you're going to have habeas corpus? It's like,
it's basically going to say your electronic discovery is going to be, clearly mapped.
Yeah.
Your electronic discovery path will be clearly mapped. That's what it effectively is going to say.
Okay. I thought there was something about the sort of absurdity of some of this language, because it was like, you're going to follow the law.
I think it's more than that. I mean, there are penalties in, I can pull up 34 and 35, but there are penalties for failure to do it, right? And okay. I think what they're trying to say is we're going to make those penalties incumbent upon everyone. And if you don't keep that in the same way as if you didn't keep a piece of paper saying, I gave John Smith $2,000, if you didn't keep the electronic record that said the same thing, we're going to have penalties for that, right? Okay. So the standard and practice is to have good record keeping practices. Okay. So I think what this is basically saying is we're engrafting upon the district the obligation to have good record keeping practices. But they would never be subject to those rules of civil procedure anyway, which is why I think Chris wrote LOL. Like, there's no case in controversy, right? So rules of civil procedure apply to a case in controversy. They didn't apply de facto. You can find other rules that apply de facto, but civil procedure rules apply to a case. This is not a case. And so that's why Chris wrote, oh, please, effectively. Like, that could never be applicable to them.
Okay.
It might have been a jumping off point for someone to map the language, but it would never be applicable unless there was a case in controversy.
Okay. All right, good. And then we have regulation, which we would remove from the policies document. We've got, I think we made these changes to the capital outlay section. I think there was some other language proposed, which was more rigid. And I think we were interested in sort of enshrining some of the same principles, but being less verbose about that, and making sure that we're calling out that there are other processes. I think that's it. So now the task in front of us is to consolidate the sort of the number of comments that we have, to sort of try to close out those comments. There's sort of different types of comments that we have. So we have the comments that are, this should be enshrined in the enumerated duties document, right? So we're, as a part of this process, trying to catalog each one of the places where we say the superintendent shall, or the superintendent or their designee shall, making sure that we have a comprehensive list of those things. That I think we started about halfway through the 3000 series, gathering those into a document, and quickly got to 50 plus rows of various duties. So I think there's certainly going to be a task that just sort of in and of itself is sort of time consuming to say, which of these duties are sort of enshrined in policy that is optional, and sort of the prioritization of those, and then you're doing a bit of an audit of all the things that are sort of a part of policy that are just not optional, that are sort of tied to law. Mm-hmm. Are we in fact doing all of those things, and can we show proof of that? Do we have the ability to make sure that we're sort of fully compliant with all of those things? We also have Let's see, open items. So there, I think at one point we started copying things into open items, and then we got, and the idea with that is, if Dr. Pearson Ugal or Dr. Harrison or Clarence aren't able to join us on one of these calls to actually sort of discuss, discuss in real time, that's fine. We can continue our work. We can gather up the open issues and then sort of have a dedicated meeting where we would do that. I actually think that's probably that, and the stuff we want to talk about with our food services committee and our transportation committees. I think those are probably the places where we can do the most good today in the time we have, is to say, let's start gathering those different things and sort of understanding which items are for which either committees or individuals. So now we have this sort of to-do list of, to really close out the 3000 series, here are the conversations that need to happen. And we consolidated across this series. The one question I would have for the group is, would we say it makes sense to gather that for the 3000 series now? And I think we can probably get through that right now. But then should we then try to go through the 4000, 5000, et cetera, and consolidate all the issues that we have for transportation committee, so that we have kind of one conversation for transportation committee, one conversation for services, Probably. Yeah.
I do have some follow-up information from from our meeting last Friday.
Okay.
On a number of different topics. I think that I talked about following up regarding the filtering and GoGuardian, and then the fees charged through school bucks, and then also document retention.
Okay. I can skip to that section. I think we have a few comments here.
So let me just pull up the email. I went back and forth with our IT network manager. So this is the way GoGuardian is currently functioning. He says, he gave me a screenshot that shows the settings within GoGuardian that determine its behavior depending on where the student is, which says, enable out of school mode, filter during out of school mode. So the content filtering takes place if a student is on a home device and logged into their ER9 account on a Chrome browser, then they get filtered and the filtering is logged. When a parent is on the same device and the same Chrome browser with the student logged off, then GoGuardian extension isn't active. It neither filters nor logs anything, since it wouldn't be loaded under the parent's login. But if the parent is on the same browser and the student is still logged into that browser, then content filtering and logging will take place.
Right.
He says we could make it harder for parents to inadvertently use the student's ER9 account by applying these settings to Chromebooks. This would, however, leave a lot of students unfiltered, and it would still be possible for a parent to end up using the student's account.
Is there a way to remind people simply to log out?
Yeah,
Does that
so that's really what I was thinking. I really kind of put this in the category of communication, that a sort of a reminder about it might be useful. So when we experienced the international Google sort of shutdown earlier this week, it also had other effects. It affected GoGuardian for a short period of time. And we learned, actually, because a student sent a note to her principal saying, I ended up on this site and I know I'm not supposed to be there, but there was some kind of a pop-up and I just want to let you know, and I'm telling you because I want you to know I didn't do this on purpose. And of course the site shouldn't, with content filtering, it shouldn't have come up. And that's how we figured out that GoGuardian there was something wrong. It's fine now. I mean, they've run the fix. But obviously the content filtering is there for a reason.
Yep.
So Basically, when this is actually why I was a couple minutes late, was because my Google was stuck in my work account and having trouble switching. But when I pull that tab,
lots of problems with Google this week. Like, it drove me bananas.
It shows me 4 options: my ER9, my work, my kids' ER9, and my kids' personal email, 4 versions of Gmail basically so I have to make sure that his ER9 is logged out on my computer.
Yes.
Where it's on the side there where it says signed out.
Right. Because if he's still logged in and you're going through the Chrome browser, then you're going to have content filtering and be logged.
Well, it hasn't actually impacted. So apparently, what I cruise for is so incredibly boring that nobody cares about it. A lot of recipes.
I do think that we could craft a communication to families about this so that everyone is well aware of the purpose of GoGuardian, and reminding them to if they're using the same computer to log out of the student's account.
Yeah, I think there is the sort of inherent and sort of easy mistakes that users can make that would lead to sort of the wrong person having their activity monitored and filtered. But then there's another layer of questions that I think people have about the capacity for this tool, and sort of who and how their oversight is being applied to how it's being used, right? And the value that we're getting from the tool. I think there are reasonable debates that could be had over whose responsibility it is, especially when we're talking about students at home, whose responsibility it is to ultimately filter for the activity and sort of monitor sort of what's happening in the household. I think there's also sort of reasonable people would say, I don't want a device in my house that where sort of a government entity is tracking the activity on it. Or even worse, this is assuming that all actors in the government entity are acting above board and sort of appropriately. Where are the controls for the people who have, like, I can show you a screenshot of the settings. What's to stop somebody from changing those settings on the fly, changing them back after they're done, and doing things that would be, I think, scary to a lot of people, because the software itself is very powerful and allows for sort of monitoring of what's on the screen. And I've heard horror stories and would love to read sort of the research, but the ability to activate a camera, the ability to activate a microphone, there are cases where that's been done in order to show that a student is cheating or was cutting school. I'm not interested in that happening in this district. Like that is so far from what we should be doing. So I think there are valid concerns about not just the sort of, whoops, I was on my kid's account and it shouldn't have been tracking what I was doing, versus the, like, how are we controlling and monitoring and making sure that, essentially cabinet level officials like yourself and Raquel and Clarence and Vicky have, constant visibility on, like, what are the settings, how is it being used, like that kind of stuff.
Right. So we have a technology advisory committee that's a internal tri-district committee, and that group meets a handful of times per year. And so when we decided to move to the upgraded version of GoGuardian, that was a lengthy discussion with that group. And that group includes IT people, but it also includes director of finance. I chair the committee, and the superintendent from time to time, depending on the discussion, and then some teacher leaders as well. We have to have some kind of filtering Otherwise, we're not eligible for grants that we receive. And now I'm trying to remember the name of the grant, and it's not coming to me. But I completely understand your concerns, John, and I will say that it would be an expectation of an employee in a position of leadership in the IT department to be cautious and of course to be completely appropriate with the use of the tool, and then to inform either the superintendent or myself if there's any type of an issue that arises. So we turned off, and I think I talked about this last week, we turned off the monitoring when we were first using this tool, when we realized that parents were inadvertently being monitored, right? The student was still logged in, and we were getting, administrators were getting alerts over the weekend or in the wee hours. And of course, we don't want that information. So we turned off that part of the tool, and it was, of course, intended for in-school use.
Right.
Now we're right now fully at home. So then I think it is worth a discussion while the students are engaged in learning during the school day. What's the role of the school and what's the role of the parent?
Right. And to a certain extent, like, I agree with all of that. I think to a certain extent, I would add a dimension of the oversight inside of central office of the sort of how these settings can be changed. If that group with you involved, with Clarence involved, with sort of the right level of supervision, sort of in the discussion phase, says, okay, here's what we're deciding. Well, how do we know that that's exactly what's happening on a day-to-day basis? There may be a way for us to say, when these settings are adjusted, they cannot be sort of applied until you see them. Okay, good, approved. Mm-hmm. And now, and that shouldn't be a thing that's changing daily. But right now, I suspect it could be changing minute by minute if a bad actor with the appropriate administrative authority wants to make those changes, that they could do that. And I think that's a particularly sort of thorny problem. Is mm-hmm. it has all kinds of impact up and down the chain, for certainly for privacy, but also for sort of the misuse of that information for blackmail, for like all kinds of issues emerge from that. So I think you want to imbue the appropriate sort of authorities with the sort of hand on the lever. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, currently there's one person in Easton and one person in Reading who have control over the settings. And because until this year, our Barlow students were really, it's a Mac environment and it doesn't run on Macs. With the use of Chromebooks this year that have been distributed to high school students, I actually have to check in and see. I think that Damian Russell is still overseeing this piece, just extending his work in Reading to Barlow. Mm-hmm. But I can check on that.
Okay. Yeah, Maureen.
I have perhaps more basic questions that come from my lack of understanding about the scope of this tool. And I guess I would really like to start with a basic understanding. Yes, it's content filtering. I've got that processed. But what are the other dimensions of this tool in terms of content filtering? How are the settings set and the camera elements and all of that? Are they really there in this tool? I guess I really wish I had a higher level explanation of this tool than I feel like we have. I feel like John has a really good understanding of what questions to ask, and I don't. But I do know that I don't know as much as I feel like I should. So I throw that out there. I throw out my own morass of things that pop into my brain as I listen to you. And the basic reality is I don't understand what this tool is capable of doing.
Right.
And I would like that understanding.
Okay. So I can arrange for someone to provide a brief presentation to this group to better understand the tool. I will say that in my role, the sort of a key selling point for me was the potential for instructional use. I wouldn't that's certainly not the default of how it's used, but it does have potential for instructional use in that the teacher can see, if you imagine your Zoom screen with the sort of dashboard of tile images, the teacher can look at the students' work when they're in the Google environment. So if students are, say, in small groups, all working on Google Docs, imagine that instead of pictures on your Zoom screen, you would see tiles of Google Docs. And the teacher then can monitor the work in a remote environment. So then potentially the teacher could then zone in and sort of share their screen, call the whole class back and share their screen and highlight student work. And I gave sort of a much shorter example last week of this type of use. As John suspected, that's probably not the way most teachers are using it, and that's true. So last year when we started to use the tool, teachers were given a tutorial, and it's one of those things with any kind of new tech tool, you have the early adopters that will say, wow, I really see the potential, and they'll begin to use it. And then others will say, well, that's nice, maybe I'll use it. So the content filtering is in the settings. So that's always happening. And then the sort of monitoring is something that we can turn on and off.
And to the extent that this allows the teachers some, functionality, is that not also provided by Zoom and other devices now? I don't know the answer to that. I'm a lawyer, not an IT person, but it seems to me that we toggle around documents all the time. And the only difference between our Zoom call here and what you're describing is multiple documents on the screen at the same time.
Yeah.
Or at least available. So I guess I question whether the functionality that drove people to be excited about this tool is not available through other means that may be less intrusive. And I do not know the answer. I don't.
Well, Zoom wouldn't do any of the filtering and monitoring, but Zoom could, in more advanced uses. You could arrange breakout rooms for your students, and if each breakout room functions the way we're functioning right now, there could be a screen up where, one student could say, I'm going to share my screen in a group of, say, 3 or 4, and then the other students could all be participating in the breakout room. And the teacher would see a screen that includes, say, 5 or 6 tiles of what we're seeing here on one screen. So that is possible. And frankly, that wasn't on our radar at all when we first started talking about GoGuardian. So another tool could be used to do that part of it, but not the content filtering side of things.
Okay, well, clearly I feel like I need more understanding of both the functionality and the reasons behind adopting.
Sure. And so I can arrange for a presentation and also to talk about it's E-rate. That's the name of the funding. What that process includes, what we need to do in order to qualify for the grant funding from the government with respect to filtering, and what happens through CNET, and then what happens through GoGuardian.
And this is a very substantial grant, I'm gathering?
I don't know the actual dollars attached to it. I can check into that. Substantial is sort of relative in districts like ours. It's certainly not the amount that a larger urban district would receive, but I would say it's more than a couple $1,000s, but I'll get the exact amount.
Thank you for that, Stephanie. You said you also had some feedback on a couple of other issues.
Yeah, so the school meals, we had a good conversation about the fees being charged, and everyone agreed that this is sort of a regressive process, in that those who are able to pay less are charged more fees because there would be, you would make several sort of requests. And then the conversation really turned into the fact that it functions as a convenience, and it doesn't prohibit parents from sending in cash or sending in a check to pay for the school meals. I mean, while school is in session in person, that option is certainly used by many parents, and then there's no fee charged. The School Bucks account is currently also being used to manage some of the activity accounts, which at the high school level in particular saves a tremendous amount of staff time. So prior to, I think it was last year, parents would send in checks for dozens and dozens of activities. And there was I believe one individual whose role it was to process all of those small checks into an account. Now the School Bucks process is used. And again, it provides a convenience for those parents who say, I want to take advantage of this, and I'm willing to pay the fee so that I don't have to write the check and send it in with my child.
Is there any ability to negotiate this fee?
It's not, it actually doesn't come back to food service. It goes back to the School Bucks company.
Right.
So we had a conversation last week about can we negotiate this within our food service contract, and they would just be willing to say eat the fee or whatever, but it doesn't go to them. It goes to that third-party vendor.
But can it be negotiated with that third-party vendor, or is part of our food service contract eliminate the ability to do that just because it's part of the contract? I guess, I mean, all fees in my mind can be negotiated somehow, or at least you can inquire about them.
And I think to further that question, it sounds like my School Bucks is just a payment processor.
Yes.
Okay. So in my experience with payment processors is that they're not great about negotiating, but there are a lot of payment processors out there, and so that I wonder about, are there other payment processors that can plug into our food services or our others? The scheme of sort of their convenience charge scheme. I'm not going to say it's uncommon, but there are a lot of other processes out there for payment vendors. In my experience is that the trend is more towards, we're going to charge you 2.5%, or we're going to charge you 3.5%. And that's just going to be what the fee is. And if you're putting in $1, okay, fine. And if you're putting in $100 or $10,000, then, that's what it is.
Right. It's the same across the board. It's not regressive like this one.
Right.
So I can ask Clarence to check into this further with Chartwell's to see if this is something that can be part of Chartwell's work to renegotiate the payment processor, and then come back with a number of quotes, so that at least we know we've done a good comparison of different companies that would provide the same service.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point, because the food services company could probably tell us right off the bat, like, oh, we could just use, this pay system instead, right? Like, we've got 5 options available. It's probably a part of their pitch is, you can use these 3 payment processors. But I mean, it's also possible it's like, we got 1 payment processor, that's it.
And it's also possible for them to go back to the payment processor and say, okay, it's 2.5% of the amount charged, not a flat fee, irrespective of the amount charged.
Right.
Which in a case like this is, I mean, it's fine if you had a flat fee and it doesn't matter and every charge is a higher amount, but every charge in this case could be a lower one. So.
Right. Well, and especially if we're using the same payment processor for our activities, I had some questions about are they still limited to $100 sort of contribution at a time? I could imagine an activity being a $150 thing. Do they have to process 2 transactions for that, or what? And
I can check into that.
Yeah.
Doesn't come into my office, but I can certainly find out. And then in terms of the document retention, this was just really the 3 of us just said, yes, we should look into this. Yes, we should have common practices across all buildings rather than just assuming that everyone's following the document retention guidelines, and that one communication to all 5 buildings and some training is in order and was sort of put on the list for central office things to do in the next several months.
And is that just on the topic of document retention, or a sort of a broader set of sort of almost sort of code of conduct and anti-discrimination process and document retention policy? Like, I've seen it done different ways, and it's I don't think it's as much a function of the way that you do it as much as sort of like how it's approached, the kind of tone with which it's approached, and sort of how important it's made, you know, people are made to understand it. But you could do it as, here's all of the stuff that everybody needs. Or you could say, look, first quarter of the year, we're going to focus on code of conduct, anti-harassment policy. Second quarter, we're going to focus on document retention, and kind of drip it up, or put them all together. Like, I've seen it both ways, and I've seen it done poorly and well in both methods.
Yeah. I think for us, it's a matter of, I mean, we have a long list of trainings that need to occur annually. And we have, you know, if you can imagine a spreadsheet, we look at the different staff members that need to participate in those trainings, and then the schedule of when it can occur. So, right. So when you think about the days that we have with our teachers prior to the year beginning, but our support staff members are not present. So then how do we schedule in their trainings that need to occur annually? So when we think about something that's new, it's a matter of who needs to be involved, and then when can it occur, and sort of what is the urgency of having this take place. So I think with having new people in central office, we are building that list and then determining when the training needs to occur. And it actually extends to things that also relate to state reports and Power School. We've had a number of staff member changes, even at the school level, and people who are responsible for data management. And we want to be sure that the training is comprehensive, and that there's a reporting system so that we have oversight in central office. So that's also part of a larger conversation.
Okay. Good. All right. Any other updates? Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to sort of open the share back up. So I'm hoping we can go through the comments and just start to sort of gather them all together. Let me see. I think I can look at the comment history here.
Before you go to that, John, is there interest in this committee trying to get an intern who would help with some of the organizational stuff here? I mean, we talked about that briefly in passing, but when I think about the amount of organizational stuff here, I do think that I don't know, I guess, if whether or not you getting someone would be more burdensome in the end run, given the level of higher level thinking you'd have to do to just do the doc organization, or whether or not it would be helpful. And maybe it's not a discussion, maybe it's an off this meeting discussion, but think about that. I'm sure we could try to find someone who would assist us, who would geek out on this stuff as much as we do.
Yeah, I have questions about where, and I think maybe we do make this a sort of stated topic for a subsequent meeting. I have questions, you know, sort of a part of that discussion I think would need to include, is that intern a sort of participant of this committee, or are they an intern for central office?
Right.
I think there's a question about, you know, how much of the work that we're doing here is sort of appropriately aligned to board members, committee members versus sort of central office staff. And there was certainly a time when Sharon was doing quite a bit of the sort of ticking, tying, and follow up on these items. And I think we had a desire at some point to sort of move more quickly than was sort of possible, right? With that model. And so, you know, in our desire to move quickly, you know, have we shifted work to our committee that doesn't belong here, and I'm not saying that. I'm perfectly fine doing that work. I think we've had a very productive more than a year now in terms of our process through these policies. But I don't know. I think definitely worth discussing and sort of figuring out. And I think we probably need Rydell, maybe Clarence, to weigh in during that discussion as well.
So, and I'm wondering too about the type of so if we were looking at interns, the interns that sort of we have at our disposal are not necessarily those who would be most skilled to do this type of work. And frankly, their internships, we would never get so I'm wondering, through area law schools, is there someone that we can get through a law school?
Right.
And of course, we don't have any type of a collaborative relationship yet.
Right.
The interns that we
can help you find someone. I would.
If that's educational work.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point, Stephanie. It's like sort of where we source them from and sort of how would that work? I think it could be really valuable to us to be able to leverage somebody in that realm. I would also say, the kind of work that we're really doing here is it could be sort of legal adjacent, but I think it's primarily project management stuff. It's sort of the sort of collection of these materials, the sort of driving through the sort of process of getting follow-up, of documenting, of sort of preparing for these sessions that can be quite sort of time consuming. And we could use some help.
Right. Yeah. So I think we should just think more about the type of intern, because many of the interns that we have also are, they're all in the School of Education. And so their backgrounds vary a great deal. So oftentimes nowadays, they're quite tech savvy, just based on their generation. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they would be well versed in this type of work. So while it might not need to be a sort of a law school student, it should be someone who, I don't know, you have to give it some more thought, would understand how to do this type of work. Because you wouldn't want to give someone editing rights also that could, you'd have to go back and reverse changes.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And I could actually imagine sort of training them on the fly. I could imagine a sort of a temporary worker, and sort of less in the realm of internship and more a sort of a temp whose specific charge is to focus on the sort of organization of these policies and sort of the work we're doing. And that's not a function of like, hey, find me somebody who's got this experience, because they don't exist. Mm-hmm. It's more a function of find me somebody who is capable of sort of working within Google Docs and working within Sheets and sort of gathering this information and sort of essentially taking instruction and sort of then going and executing, or over the course of a few hours a week kind of thing. Okay. So let's, we only have a couple minutes left. Sorry, I'm going to open up this sort of comments window again. And I want this comments window to be larger. It doesn't want to allow me to do that. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get a sense for the breadth of sort of the volume of these comments. Yeah, it's a lot. So I think we make our next meeting about just sort of working through the comments specifically, and we'll just sort of probably devote the hour to that. And I think we can get through it, but certainly not with 2 minutes left. Everybody comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, then that will take us to public comment. No members of the public being present. Committee member comment. No, I don't think we're meeting next week. I think that's right. So I'm going to take the opportunity to say happy holidays to everyone. Please enjoy.
Yes.
Good. No further comment. Okay.
You have to bring photos of that luge to the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. I'll bring a video. All right. Good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Good. Seconded. Good. Thank you, Maureen. All in favor?
Aye.
Very
Have
good.
a good break, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Adjourned at
Bye.
9:50.